Yesterday, your Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was on Capitol Hill, and he faced off with some pretty fierce questioning from Democrats who like to put him in a box, characterize him, slander him, lie about him. You see, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has committed three major sins, okay? Number one, he tried to run against Joe Biden. They still blame him for part of why Joe Biden collapsed, because he actually, told the truth when he wanted to run in the Democrat primary. That you can never forgive. Number two, well, he's an apostate. He went and endorsed a Republican for president, not just any Republican, Donald Trump, which of course leads us to the third sin. He's actually working for and supporting Donald Trump as a member of his cabinet. So they hate RFK Jr. more than anyone else in the Trump government, in some cases even more than Donald Trump himself, because you betray the party, especially if your name's a Kennedy, oh, they're coming after you. But the good news is RFK Jr. fights back. He's done with them. Take a look at this little exchange.
Anybody thinks that we did gold standard medicine in this country from these institutions, look at our children. They're the sickest children in the world. Laura, you say that excuse me, Congressman DeLauro, you say that you've worked for 20 years on getting food dye out. Give me credit. I got it out in 100 days. Yeah. All right, so let's work together and do something that we all believe in, which is have healthy kids in our country, for God's sake.
Ms. Dean.
That together. It's not, there's no such thing as Republican children and Democratic children. There's just kids, and we should all be be concerned with them.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Dean.
That's a pretty powerful moment, and I got to hand it to him. Listen, I'm very suspicious of RFK Jr. He's got a long track record of being an environmental wacko and saying some pretty horrific things about Republicans, about conservatives, about businesses that I care about, oil companies, gas companies, energy companies, because he was a zealot for the environment. But I got to tell you, as Democrats viciously attack him, these are his friends. These are family. These are people who he's supported for his entire lifetime in politics. He's a Kennedy, for God's sake. It's the royal family of the Democrat Party. And the more they go after him on a vicious, vitriolic, and very personal level, I got to tell you, I think the more conservative this guy becomes, or maybe not conservative as much, is just anti-Democrat, which is enough for me at this point, because they're an incredibly dangerous political party, the way they currently are composed and what they currently stand for. And he's an incredibly effective weapon. And he was having none of it. Watch this long exchange. This is a good one. It's going to take a while. I'm going to let it play quite a bit. But just watch how he fights back against this wackadoodle House member in the House of Representatives.
With the measles issue, Mr. Secretary, you keep comparing the U.S. to other countries. You compare us to Europe, but the Europe you are referring to is the WHO European region. That's 53 countries in Europe and in Asia, including those with low vaccination rates like Romania, that has never eliminated measles. If you compare us to Western Europe countries that we often compare ourselves to, like Great Britain, they have seen no measles death this year. Let me move to the NIH. In your testimony, you say you want to quote, and I quote, rescale our biomedical research budget, unquote. Excuse me, but that's BS. You are not rescaling NIH research. You are proposing to cut it by $20 billion. And according to our colleagues in the Senate, NIH has effectively cut research funding by $2.7 billion this year in comparison to the same period last year. That's a cut of 35% during that period. That includes cutting cancer research by 31%. This is the report put out by the Senate, Trump's War on Science, which goes into detail about how we are, in fact, dealing with cutting scientific research. Mr. Secretary, are you freezing or withholding funding that Congress appropriated in 2025 for life-saving NIH research?
Let me address your first issue first, because I want to correct you. We have about 1,100 measles cases in this country. The growth rate last year was 15 additional, so we have plateaued. Mexico has roughly the same number with a third of our population, and they got 300 extra cases last week. Canada has more measles, 1,500. They have 1/8 of our population. Western Europe has about 6,000, which is 10 times the number that we have.
Well,
Oh, you are wrong about
well,
what you said earlier.
we can discuss that, but I think one has to consider whether or not we're dealing with decades of data proving how effective and safe the measles vaccine is. I want to move to that. I want my questions answered on, are you freezing and withholding funding that Congress appropriated in 2025 for life-saving NIH research?
We are not withholding any funding for life-saving research.
Okay. Do you commit to following the law?
Of
and
course.
Fully obligating funding that Congress appropriated? We appropriated, it is the law of the land for NIH research, and to obligate those funds by September 30th of this year? Or are you planning to break the law by impounding congressionally appropriated funds?
If you appropriate me the funds, I'm going to spend them.
We have in the bill, you are cutting the NIH by $18 billion, or you're proposing to cut it by $20 billion. The Congress appropriated those funds. It passed into law. It's part of the 2024 budget, and we are under a continuing resolution that has adopted the 2024 numbers. How then can you justify cutting $20 billion from the biomedical research budget?
If you appropriate the money to me, I'm going to spend that.
We have appropriated, Mr. Secretary.
Then I'm going to spend it.
Then you're going to spend it. You're not going to cut $20 billion from the NIH.
The White House proposal is to do very, very large cuts at NIH.
Well, that is contrary to the money appropriated.
Ranking member.
Yes.
If Congress appropriates me the money, I'm going to spend the money. You have the power of the purse here.
Thank you.
You know that.
Thank you for reiterating that. But I think that I'm not sure the administration really has internalized that. Particularly, Mr. Vogt hasn't internalized that when he says that we can in fact impound money. The money is there. The 2024 budget includes the funding for the NIH. Will you commit to spending the money that is in 2024 in that budget?
As I said, ranking member, if you appropriate the money, I'm going to spend that money.
The money has been appropriated. So the answer to that is, if you're not willing to accept the funds that have been lawfully voted by members of the House and Senate on the money for the National Institutes of Health, we're going to hold you to your word that that funding is there. It should be transferred from 24 to 25, and you've cut already $20 billion.
Can I just pause here for a second and just reflect on what it must be like to be a reasonably accomplished individual who's worked your entire adult life to reach the highest level of success, now a cabinet member at the White House in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services, and you've got to maintain your cool and your and collect yourself to try to be as respectful as possible to someone like this. Seriously, and it's not just that she looks like a freak. I mean, when you watch this exchange, who comes across as a reasonable human being who's just trying to have a rational conversation and who is completely out of her mind? I think the pronoun I used just sort of gave you a clue as to where you think I fall in this equation. It's outrageous. And by the way, this entire debate that they're having right here is ridiculous. Yes, the money's been appropriated. It's been part of the budget. Two things about that. Number one, you heard her mention Mr. Vogt. That's the director of the Office of Management and Budget. They're putting together what's called a recension order. A recension order is when the administration can go back to Congress and say, yeah, we don't need this money anymore. PBS is going to be a part of that recension order. And maybe some funding at NIH is going to be a part of that recension order, where they can say, take this money back. That puts the political ball back in Congress's lap. You know, Congress is sitting there talking about how we've got, a budget deficits and we're borrowing money that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to our children and our grandchildren. And we've got to get our fiscal house in order. And here you've got a president saying, yeah, we don't need all the money that you've given us. We're not going to do all those things. So why don't you take it back? And now Congress is going to have to decide, nope, we demand that you spend this money. And one other thing that's really important about this entire debate they're having, when she says, we're under a continuing resolution and this is all part of the 2024 budget. Understand something. The budget exploded during COVID, during the pandemic, during the lockdown. it almost doubled the budget. The federal budget almost doubled in the 3 years of the lockdown. The continuing resolution means that they have continued the spending levels. They are currently spending in this fiscal year that we're in right now at the level that we were in the first year of the pandemic. And a chunk of that money, a huge chunk of that money, was to keep businesses and people afloat during the lockdowns because the government shut them down. It was sent out to local jurisdictions and states to augment their health systems because of the big influx of demand due to the lockdown. It was to keep school systems floating. By the way, if you're sitting in a state right now that has a budget deficit and they still can't get things going with all the money that the federal government that they don't have just already distributed to them anyway, you've got an incompetent governor. You've got a governor who spends money that they never even thought they'd have, but they spent it anyway, and they're still in deficit. It's disgusting what's going on at the state level, and it's even worse what's going on at the federal level. So when she's screaming about how we're under continuing resolution, you've got to spend that money we gave you. It's money that was appropriated and continued from where we were at the pandemic. You think the NIH needs as much money as they were appropriated during the pandemic COVID-19 lockdown? You know they increased funding through the sky for NIH and CDC during the pandemic. And by the way, look what they used that money on. And how effective was it? They did a hell of a job, didn't they? But because we haven't gone back to regular order and we continue to pass continuing resolutions, what a continuing resolution does is just maintain the spending levels that we're in. And so it's okay for the Trump administration to come back and say, listen, guys, you've given us all this money and it's on a continuing resolution based on spending levels that you demanded during the pandemic. Well, guess what? The lockdown's been over for several years now, and we now don't need this money. But look at how hysterical Purplehead is over here. She literally did you guys ever watch what was the really bizarre Jim Henson movie? What was it? Not Black Diamond, Black Sapphire, with David Bowie, right? Where all of the evil puppet trolls were designed by the Jim Henson Muppet team. She's like straight out of that. Maybe Fraggle Rock. I'm not sure, but that's not normal what we're dealing with here. And imagine having to answer to her. Imagine having to sit there and be respectful and actually, not bust out laughing and roll your eyes and say, I can't believe I even have to answer your questions. But that's where we are.
Let's get that money back. Let's get that money back. You have an obligation to carry out the law and to implement what the Congress has done. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Chronic disease and tobacco. Tobacco use is a major contributor to chronic disease and is a leading preventable cause of death in our nation. Each year, killing nearly 500,000 Americans, costing the nation nearly $250 billion in healthcare costs. CDC's tips from former smokers media campaign alone is estimated to have saved more than $7 billion in healthcare costs by helping more than 1 million smokers quit. Why did you eliminate CDC's Office of Smoking and Health, an office that reduces the number of kids using tobacco products, helps order tobacco users to quit, and saves taxpayers dollars?
We have, under the reorganization, and I'm going to talk very, very broadly, because as of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, we are under a court order not to do any further planning on the reorganization. And I've been advised by my attorneys and not to talk about it. But I will just say broadly, many of the programs that the Democrats are now saying were cut at CDC were not cut at all. Those programs were transferred to the Administration for Healthy America. But I'm not permitted to talk in any more detail because of a court order.
I know we're just dealing with words. You transfer it here, there's less money overall for the agency, therefore there's less money for the programs. In both 2024, 2025, Congress, again, power of the purse resides here, appropriated $246 million for CDC's tobacco prevention programs. Do you commit to following the law again, fully obligating those funds so that we can help adults who want to quit using tobacco and prevent teens from becoming addicted?
Allow me to answer that by pointing out the absolute cataclysmic disorganization of this agency under your oversight for 40 years. We had 9 separate offices of women's health. When we consolidate them, the Democrats say we're eliminating them. We're not. We're still appropriating the 3.7 billion, but we're not keeping all 9. We had 8 separate offices for minority health. We eliminated 1. We had 27 HIV offices.
Okay, let me just, I'm going to
We had
because
59
the
behavioral
chair is
health
right.
programs.
I'm well over time. If you could just get us what has been eliminated, why you're doing it, and the criteria by which the elimination has occurred. That is information that this committee needs in order to be able to do our job in terms of appropriating funds. Thank you.
And we will gladly provide that to you, but right now we're under a court order that prohibits us from doing so.
Okay, before we go on, I just want to say, we also need to make sure that we bear in mind that the secretary is here talking about FY26 funding. So he is committed to that. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear. We're talking about FY26 on this.
Thank you. Exactly. That's actually
Jesus,
the
Mr.
bigger
Secretary.
point here with Purplehead, is that all of her questions had to do with spending that's been appropriated in fiscal year 24 and 25. The entire purpose of this hearing is to talk about the budget for next year. Every single question had to do with the budget that was passed before RFK Jr. was even the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he came in with the president with one clear mandate to the American people, which was to reorganize the giant bureaucratic mess that's been created with decades of neglect, with billions and trillions of dollars being flushed down the toilet because he can't even get anything done. And as he just put it, we're actually less healthy than we were when y'all started spending these billions and trillions of dollars. You just heard him say, you've got 9 different offices for women's health concerns, 27 different HIV offices. Maybe we can consolidate these efforts and be more efficient and actually get something done, and maybe even get it done with less money. And Democrats are freaking out over that. And they call it cuts. And that's the lie that you're going to keep hearing. You're cutting this, you're cutting that, you're cutting this, you're cutting that. And instead, what they're actually doing is being more effective with your dollars. But notice how Purplehead here and all the other Democrats on Capitol Hill act like it's their money that they're giving out. And again, as we turn to the Senate now, the secretary bounced back and forth between both chambers. He had a hearing in the Senate as well. I want to remind you, the whole purpose of these hearings is to get through the reconciliation process that involves the budgetary needs for fiscal year 26. So let's see what brand new freshman Senator Also Brooks of Maryland wants to talk about.
Are you aware? What does the assisted reproductive technology mean to you? Are you familiar with that?
Are you talking about IVF?
Well, it's assisted reproductive technology. It's a division. Do you know what it does?
Is it part of NIH?
No, it's actually a part of your agency. It's a part.
NIH is part of my agency, Senator. You should know that.
I do know that, but it's actually a part of, it's the CDC is where it is.
Okay, then it's CDC.
Right, okay. Let me just ask you, and again, these are all of the things you seem unfamiliar with, the ones, the programs that you've.
You're unfamiliar with my agency, that NIH and CDC are part of HHS.
Thank you. Seriously, she makes Purplehead look like a freaking MIT scholar. Are you familiar with these programs? Well, are they in my agency? Well, they're in NIH. Well, NIH is one of my agencies. But she's basically, laying out this program. She doesn't know what it means. She doesn't know what it does. And she doesn't even know if it's part of Health and Human Services. But again, Kennedy's the one who's got to fact check in real time these morons and actually treat them like they deserve respect. And then for his troubles, while he's giving his statement to the Senate, a bunch of lunatic terrorists somehow got into the room and they started an insurrection. You heard me, insurrection.
I'm presenting today supports these goals and reflects.
The witness will suspend. The committee will come to order. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room. Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be tolerated. Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted. while the committee conducts its business, Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
All right, now a couple of things about this here. By the way, are they going to get charged and thrown in jail without a hearing for a year for disrupting an official proceeding? Do you know that the majority of the 1,000 people that were arrested for the events of January 6th, when they finally did get a charge, they were charged with things like parading without a permit, I kid you not, or disrupting an official proceeding? Well, these people just disrupted an official proceeding. Are we going to treat them like the insurrectionists that they clearly are? It's almost like there's a double standard with the Capitol Police and with the Democrats on Capitol Hill. I also want to show you something else. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His father was murdered by an assassin's bullet. His uncle was murdered by an assassin's bullet. He is now the highest profile member of the Kennedy family who suffered 2 political assassinations in their family, which is extraordinary, right? He's now the highest profile member of that family to hold office again. It's a higher office than his uncle, Ted Kennedy, who never made it past the level of U.S. Senator because, you know, he killed a woman in Chappaquiddick. I digress. So you're a Kennedy, and you're still haunted by the assassination of your father, who was on his way to becoming president of the United States. You now have a public profile. You now have an official cabinet level position. I want you to watch how RFK Jr. reacts here when over his left shoulder, in what should be a safe and secure room, a Senate chamber hearing, watch how he reacts when this loud, disruptive noise comes out of nowhere.
Presenting today supports these goals and reflects.
That is absolutely terrifying. And your heart's got to go out to the man. Because it's got to, I mean, I never considered this. I hope you have, that he probably thinks because of lunatics out there, he is basically targeted on a daily basis by insane lunatics who want to continue the Kennedy legacy of assassinations. The poor guy, I saw him react like that, that flinch, that, I mean, he's a tough dude, but that's rough. By the way, this guy right here, the Larry David lookalike who has to get dragged out and pushed around, and good for them. That guy's a multi-billionaire. You know who he is? That's Ben from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream. Ben from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream led the screaming lunatics who invaded this hearing to scream about how they're really concerned about the health of American citizens and the health care, so-called, that they demand through the Department of Health and Human Services. That's why they were there, to protest Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yeah, that's right. Of course, these left-wing lunatics, when they worry about health care in America, it means 2 things. It means they want women to have the right to murder their unborn babies without any disruption whatsoever. In fact, actually more so, they want you to pay for that murder. And number 2, they want a communist, Marxist, Stalin-like complete takeover of our healthcare system by the federal government, because everything the government does always gets improved and is better when it's taken over in a socialist way. Yeah, Ben from Ben & Jerry's is demanding that. Ben from Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, a man who has become a billionaire by selling little pints of poison full of what, like 3, 4, 5,000 calories a pint. That's how he's gotten rich, by peddling 1,000-calorie pint ice cream products to you to make our country fatter and lazier and more diabetic. And now he's demanding that RFK Jr. step aside because he's the one harming health in this country. You can't make it up, but he's a big-time left-wing Democrat, and he funds the party. And RFK Jr., I think he's starting to figure out every single day who the liars are, who the hypocrites are, and who the real dangers to this country are.